email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Joining me on the conversation today is Dr. Brad Walkenhorst, the Chief Technology Officer at Bastille Networks. He's an expert in RF sensor networks and has a passion for securing enterprise networks. Dr. Walkenhorst received his BS and MS degrees in electrical engineering from Brigham Young University and received his PhD from my alma mater, Georgia Tech. He specializes in signal processing and electromagnetic research applied to wireless communications and spectrum operations. He has an extremely impressive track record in this field and is a gifted speaker and technical contributor with over 70 publications and 4 patents. It's always a pleasure to connect with a fellow Yellow Jacket, so thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Clint. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. I always like talking to Yellow Jackets, so we need more of us out there.
Yeah.
So I'm always interested in people's backstories, and I'm just curious, kind of what's yours. I knew from the time I was really young, maybe 10 years old, I wanted to be an electrical engineer, but I'm just curious, what led you down the path that you're on?
No, that was not my story at all. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I was good at math and I was good at science. I had a father who had gotten a degree in mechanical engineering, and I'd heard from a very young age that, hey, you might be a good engineer. So it was always on my radar as a possibility. I'd gotten into computer technology a little bit, thought maybe I would major in computer science. But my story was I didn't know what I wanted to do really until I got to college and attended an orientation in the engineering department or in the College of Engineering. And they had a representative from each of the schools stand up and give a little spiel. And the double E guy stood up and said, if you like math and physics, you might like electrical engineering. And that was step one for me. And I kind of checked the box and said, well, I like those things. So every little step after that was just a confirmation that that was a good path for me.
Well, you decided you really liked it because you went all the way through and got your PhD. So
yeah, that wasn't the plan at the beginning. Again, it was just like one step at a time. Let's figure out what's next, and that's where I ended up. So
yeah, the PhD stuff scares me.
It should. It's not for everybody. It's a little painful. You got to be a bit of a masochist if you want to go that far.
Yeah, just to see the things about it on TV and the different ones and having to write your thesis and defend your thesis. I'm like, yeah, I think I'll pass on that.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about Bastille Networks.
All right. So Bastille is a cybersecurity company. We focus on we focus on the wireless domain. So we started, I want to say it was about 9 years ago, working on IoT security. And then we kind of evolved from there, and we now focus on a whole bunch of different protocols. So cellular is a big piece of it, Wi-Fi, of course, Bluetooth low energy, and a whole host of IoT protocols that we detect within customers' environments. We demodulate the headers of those packets so that we get metadata that indicates some kind of behavior about the devices. So whatever's sent in the clear, we gather that information and we store it all in a database and localize the emissions. So you can figure out what was talking when, and you can always look back in time for historical information. So we have customers with any number of use cases that we can get into if the conversation goes that way, but that's basically what we do. We're about securing the wireless attack surface.
So it's almost like forensics, right? You can look back and see, well, who talked to whom and when.
That is definitely part of it, yeah. So having that historical data is really valuable.
So what challenges does your team face when developing what ended up being the world's first solution for accurately detecting and locating cell phones using cellular signals, and how were those challenges overcome?
Yeah, lots of challenges. The first one that comes to mind, I mentioned that we started as an IoT type of company. We began building detection and localization capabilities, and as we were trying to go to market, our customers were consistently coming back with a message that said, this sounds great, but if we're going to buy this, we really need the capability of detecting and localizing cellular traffic, so cell phones. And that's probably the biggest challenge that the company faced, was pivoting to that, solving that problem. It might not sound that difficult on the face of it, but cellular networks have become, they're not perfect by any means, but they've become more secure in many ways in more recent generations. And so that for us includes some obscurity about how individual devices are communicating with the base stations. So the ability to differentiate those devices and localize them individually is a really challenging problem. Um, you asked how we overcame some of those challenges, right? So that one, again, one of the biggest challenges, I think it was just sheer stubbornness that allowed us to overcome it. So, and I think stubbornness is a really valuable trait, but of course you have to be careful about how you apply stubbornness. We felt at the time that we had a really good problem because it was freakishly hard, but we felt that it was tractable. And of course, the customer feedback was pointing us in that direction. So with a sufficiently hard problem, if you tackle it and crack it, that gives you a big competitive advantage. And what we found, we had a number of competitors at the time that all peeled off and pivoted in different directions. So today we really don't have much competition at all. So I would say that was one of the biggest challenges that turned out to be a huge opportunity for us. Um, I think every startup faces any number of challenges. I tend to focus on the technical ones because I'm, CTO, that's technical. But there have been a number of more recent business and logistical challenges as we grow. Like any company seeking to grow, we end up facing, supply chain challenges, which are more more about
Ubiquitous now.
more recent events. But that can always be a challenge. It's just been incredibly challenging in recent years. And then, of course, the struggles associated with trying to grow staff and manufacturing capacity to meet an ever-growing demand. But yeah, there's just all kinds of challenges. I think the key is tackling the critical ones in a way that is efficient to maximize your effectiveness in overcoming those challenges. Because every challenge is fundamentally an opportunity. You just have to decide if some are worth jumping over and if some are worth just ignoring. That's part of the trick, I think, is discerning that.
Let's poke on the people side a minute. Then you mentioned finding good talent. Did the pandemic throw you a curveball at all, or were you able to work remotely with no problem? And if so, did you see any impact on the teaming aspects of working together in a collaborative way when it's really everybody remote?
That's a good question. I don't feel like we had a problem acquiring the talent that we needed during the pandemic, and we transitioned pretty seamlessly to a remote work environment. But your question about the teaming aspect, I think that's a valid one. I think we all struggled in different ways to bring people together in a new environment where the physical connections were lacking. Um, I think I think that's valid. I think that is a challenge. I think that different personalities handle that different ways. Um, and I think that I don't know that we focused a lot on it, but I think we tried to create opportunities for people to connect in that new post-COVID environment.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that I've seen, or one of my concerns during the pandemic when everybody pivoted to remote, probably wasn't from the people that already worked together in the past. It's the new guys or the new people that got brought on during that period of time where
Sure.
they didn't have that time in the office with each other and didn't really form those connections. And now you're just an email address or a fake, little thumbnail on Zoom.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same as, who's my mentor going to be? How do I learn the company culture? Those are the challenges that I saw.
Yeah.
Again, not so much for long-term employees, but more for the new people coming on. But
that's true. I agree with that.
And much to my wife's chagrin, I like to watch true crime stories. And so, you always see them getting the cell phone data. So is this even being able to more accurately pinpoint, who was talking on their cell phone and where, not just off which tower, but where they really were?
That's fiction.
Okay.
But, there are capabilities that are more targeted, more nation state type capabilities than what we offer.
Gotcha.
We don't get into the game of identifying individuals because that's really none of our business, and that presents all kinds of legal challenges. So we avoid In fact, I mentioned that we extract a certain set of data from the packets. We completely ignore the payload, so the data itself. We don't care what someone is sending someone else.
Mhm.
And we don't try to make connections between individual device IDs and people, because that gets into personally identifiable information, and again, legal issues associated with that.
Right. So I'm not going to see you guys on NCIS New Orleans with Bastille. Look at this person on this corner.
Yeah, no, that's not us.
All right, that's good. So how has your platform really evolved over the years, particularly in terms of its integration capabilities with other enterprise security systems?
Yeah, good. That's a very broad question. At a high level, I can say our product began simply with detection and localization capabilities, and then has slowly evolved through the recent years to be more intelligent, more capable, more integrated. So maybe let me just focus on the integration part of that
Sure.
question. So we created our products to be an API first architecture. So what that means to me is we eat our own dog food. Everything that we create, that we allow customers to access, that's all we use. We don't have any secret calls. Nothing is private, proprietary. It's all open. So people can touch the system in the exact same ways that Bastille touches it. And so that has a couple of nice features. So one is our customers, they could literally build user interfaces that do everything that ours do. I mean, we provide them these UIs. You could go out and build them yourselves. I don't recommend that; it'd be a waste of your time. But you can, and you can exercise a whole bunch of functionality that way to do custom things. Moreover, because we're focused on API first, I think it makes it easy for us to create those integrations. And it's for us, it's as simple as an admin user interface. You don't have to do it this way, but we've created the infrastructure to enable it. All you have to do is a few button clicks to set up a webhook with the target address, security token. That's all built in. So you configure it that way to automate the transmission of a subset of data that Bastille takes in, comes to rest in the database, but in the flow gets flowed out as webhooks to the targets, whatever they are. So if we have some third-party system, it's as simple as creating that webhook, and then on the receiving end, configuring that system to know what to do with that data when it comes in. So there are cases where we go to build an integration like that, and it requires some level of translation. So sometimes we have to create a middleman that serves to translate between the native webhook and what the receiving system wants to see. But many times that's not even necessary. So we've really focused on enabling that integration to be as seamless as possible. As you're probably aware, cybersecurity is it's a challenging and very broad field, and no one company offers a solution that meets all the needs of enterprise networks. So integration is critical, and we're
Right.
not the only ones who focus on that. I can just say that we focus on it because we know it's important, and we do it well.
Okay, that's fair. Can you give some examples of some of the wireless threats and vulnerabilities that your platform has successfully detected and addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen any number of vulnerabilities. You've probably seen a number in the press, and I could talk about some of those, but I'll just talk about the ones that we have specifically seen from our system. There are cables that you can buy. I don't have one with me, but a standard charging cable like this, they look just like that, except that inside of the sleeve of the cable, there is a microcontroller and some antennas that allow it to communicate wirelessly via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So this becomes the receiving end of a command and control link. When you plug it into your device, which becomes now a target of an attack, some attacker connects wirelessly, and through the elevated privileges of a USB port, they can do pretty much anything. So they can send They can send keystrokes for keystroke injection. They can install malware. They can exfiltrate your data. They can basically own your device, and from that, work into other areas of the network. So it's a very powerful device. We found one of these with our system on an executive floor of a Fortune 10 company. We've seen them in other places. They're not ubiquitous by any means, but they're readily available, and they are in the wild. So that's a little bit crazy. So that's one of the things we found. In another customer's facility, we found a laptop that was hardwired connected to a server in a data center. And that laptop was beaconing out not only Wi-Fi, but Bluetooth as well, seeking a connection. So that's not an attack per se, but it's bad security hygiene. And that's actually what we focus on a lot. Like, we want to minimize the risk by pointing out certain behaviors or configurations that could be used as an attack or
Right.
to enable an attack. So that was an interesting find. The customer was happy to see that and take it apart. In another customer's facility, we so the customer side that was operating the Bastille system found new Bluetooth signals that were coming up, and with a little bit of an investigation, they discovered that the physical facilities organization was installing Bluetooth-enabled RFID readers. And it turns out those readers are susceptible to a DDoS attack that can basically shut them down. So you want to lock down a facility, you conduct a DDoS attack and shut everybody's RFID readers off. Well, procurement didn't realize that the systems they had bought had Bluetooth enabled. In fact, their first response to the other part of the organization was, no, they're not. We don't have any Bluetooth RFID readers. And then it took a little bit of work to convince them that, yes, you do, and they're susceptible to attack, so go fix them. We've had a number of instances where industrial control systems had some kind of unsecure Zigbee link that had either been left enabled upon installation or had been maybe inadvertently re-enabled after maintenance. And because those can be wired to the network for control, now they're dual homed, and so there's susceptibility to attack the Bluetooth and tunnel your way into other parts of the network. There's one last example that I want to give that I know I said I was going to focus only on the ones that we see, but this one's relevant, I think, because it was such an interesting attack method, and it's something that Bastille would have seen if we had been installed there. So I think it's a cool story to tell. This was a drone that had a Wi-Fi device as a payload, and it flew over and landed on the roof of a building that was home to a financial services company. And this Wi-Fi device that was the payload could, not clear on all the details, because they don't release everything, but apparently what's most likely to have happened is that the device acted as an evil twin. They impersonated an access point on the corporate network, captured devices, probably tricked someone into giving up credentials, and then used that to make their way into the network and start poking around. So that's kind of cool and also scary, but
in an evil way, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go out and do that, but I hat tip to the guys who thought of it. It's cool. But just knowing that kind of attack is possible, I think that's step one, right? And then how do we identify those things in real time? And worst case, if it happens, we've got data to do forensic analysis on it. But anyway, we have the ability to detect that kind of an attack, and I think that's a cool story because it's not a difficult attack to conduct. The new part of this was that it was delivered by drone, which is kind of cool.
Mission Impossible stuff, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The first story you told, I remember seeing, it was not that long ago, the airports had come out saying, don't use the outlets at the airport to charge your phones now because of something similar. And so I was double clicking on the story, and that's where I learned about those cables you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Was I had and you can get those, like you said, they're readily available, and just
Yeah.
the thought process that people go through is just amazing to me. If they could just put that to good use, we'd be a lot better off.
I know. I know.
Let's take a drone. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you ensure that your software-defined radio technology remains up to date and adaptable in the face of all these, that we just discussed, constantly emerging new protocols and threats?
Sure. So, so I guess we didn't really give much discussion of the sensors themselves. We have RF sensors that are based on a software-defined radio architecture. And basically what that means is most of the processing involved, one could argue that all of it, I mean, it depends on what you define as processing, but basically all of the modulation, demodulation, everything is software configurable. And this is a term that's been around for probably 20 some years. But as technologies evolved, digital processing became more and more capable. Now, everything is kind of moving towards the antenna so that everything is digital. And that's the basic architecture that our sensors operate on. And the advantage of that approach is flexibility. So given that flexibility, pretty much everything that we need to do to upgrade our system is software/firmware reconfigurable. So it's as simple as some protocol evolves in some way. We create the hooks needed to deal with those changes, to demodulate this new variant of the protocol or whatever it is, and we incorporate that in our software or firmware load, and we flow that out to sensors. So all the hooks are in the system to enable that deployment to occur, and it's very straightforward to do. So again, the advantage is flexibility. We can do other things that might require hardware changes that get a little more difficult, but the vast majority of what we would need to do for years really is all software configurable.
As you were talking, I was thinking in my head, you're going to have a new unit that sits on the roof of these buildings and shoots down drones.
Yeah, that's right. That's next. That's part of the roadmap. Yeah.
Well, that concludes part one of my conversation with Dr. Brett Walkenhorst, CTO of Bastille Networks. Coming up in part two, Brett discusses how Bastille can stay on the cutting edge of wireless threat detection.
We just have to be ready for anything. We have to be ready for the twists and turns that the world is going to throw at us in the form of attackers, hackers, or whatever. What things are going to happen, and we need to be able to adapt, to not be locked into a certain way of thinking, so that we can address new and emerging challenges when they come.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.